All right, let's talk about the final at-large bids and the teams that got left out. The first four is going to be Rutgers against Notre Dame and Indiana against Wyoming. That's the first four. They're the last four teams in the field. That means Texas A&M got left out. Xavier got left out. Somewhat surprisingly, Dayton was the first team out. Not surprised Dayton was out. I didn't think Dayton had a chance. Turns out Dayton was in the field as long as Richmond didn't upset Davidson in the title game of the A10 tournament. That's one basically every bracketologist would have missed on if it would have gone down that way. You got any issue with what they did? Final at-large bids, teams that they left out.
Again, I understand. You can say, well, these are teams that aren't going to go far anyway. It's not always true. In fact, in most years, one of the first four teams wins at least a first-round game. Obviously, UCLA went first four to Final Four, and VCU did that in the first year we had this format back in 2011. Texas A&M was the team that most people projected had done enough to get in. Yet again, where was Texas A&M? SEC championship game just didn't matter. So here we are. Dayton, how about that, man? How about those Flyers unknowingly being in? Dayton was in the field on Saturday night, man. And then their own conference brethren, the Spiders, did them in. By the way, side note, Richmond's not a 12. Like, put them on the 13 line. South Dakota State should be a 12, but whatever. But Dayton was, and then they get knocked out. So the A10 was always destined for two bids. No one knew it. I said this on HQ. I think I said it on the podcast. To me, there was so much variety in the bubble teams' resumes that we were bound to get contradictory results, and I'm okay with that. Texas A&M overall, surprising to me that it wasn't I thought it was in, and it wasn't even the first team out. 4-10 quad 1, not great. 5-0 quad 2, really good. 5-2 quad 3, 8-0 in quad 4. Away from home, it was 10-8, above 500 record there. You know, its metrics, net ranking, KenPom, BPI, 45 or better. KPI was 53. You know, I thought it had done enough, but it doesn't get in. And so I'm not crying foul for any of the teams that did. I don't think anyone got. I will say this. A&M is surprising that it didn't get in. There have been years where there are teams that have not. And if you're an A&M fan, I get it. Like, you're furious, although your team just played its way into this thing like a few days ago. But I get it. There have been years where there's been a team or two that's been left out, and it's like, what are we doing? You know, how do you possibly justify doing that? I don't get that this year. Although I will say, JP, my man, this first four, Indiana squeaking in. I guess I convinced myself once it beat Illinois that it was going to be enough. And then Rutgers, and then Wyoming. I thought Wyoming wasn't going to Dayton. There were some that were on that. I want to say Palm was on that.
Here's the thing. The Mountain West Conference was going to get four teams. One of them was going to Dayton.
The only one that was even obviously up possibly to get there. I agree.
I said that earlier in the week. I was like, the Mountain West is getting four, and one of them will end up in Dayton, guaranteed.
You nailed it. I love the Rutgers. So Notre Dame, in my opinion, has got no business being in this field. It just doesn't. It might be harder to justify putting Notre Dame in this field than it is to justify putting Tennessee on the 3 line, and that's saying something. But again, not, good on Mike Brey. They get back in and all that. But Rutgers versus Notre Dame, you want to talk about two glaringly different resumes. I do like the fact that they paired them against each other. Winner that's going to play Alabama in the West. Rutgers, you and I were on the same page. We thought Rutgers would get punished because it rated so lowly in every single metric comparatively. But at the end of the day, and there's no saying that this will be consistent 3 years from now when most of the people on this committee won't be on this committee anymore. But it's basically this. Rutgers had more good wins by far than any other team that was on the bubble. Not close. It also had things weighing its resume down to an extent that no other team was really having to deal with, and had that kind of hanging over its head. They went with the team that could, prove to have gotten the wins, and so they were in. But again, there are inconsistencies. Oklahoma, to a certain degree, had this as well. Oklahoma out 3 games above 500. Oklahoma 18-15, 4 quad 1 wins, 6-2 in quad 2, only 1 quad 3 loss. Yet Michigan gets in. It's not even going to Dayton. So yes, there are some inconsistencies. I'm just thrilled we got a bracket, man. I'm awesome. I'm just happy to be talking to you about this. I think overall the committee I'll give it a B overall. The first 4 games are super fascinating because not just because of the matchups and the styles, but because of the teams that will win and the potential, 6-11, 5-12s that might be awaiting them. What about your thoughts on the teams that didn't get in versus who did?
Well, first on the first 4, you mentioned Michigan doesn't even have to go to Dayton. When I was sort of just going through and at seed line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just ranking, taking the top 25 and 1 and then expanding it. My initial draft had Rutgers, Indiana, and Michigan in the first 4, based on if I'm just ranking teams. My understanding is they couldn't do that, even if they wanted to. They can't do it because I think the rule. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're usually better about this stuff than I am. You can't play somebody in the first 4 that you already played in the regular season.
That's my understanding.
Right. So Big Ten team, you can't put 3 Big Ten teams in the first 4, even if you think that's where they belong, because by definition, that means 2 of them got to play each other. And that runs contrary to the bracketing principles. So either Rutgers, Indiana, or Michigan, if they're going to be in the bracket, they've got to go in the bracket because you could at most have 2 Big Ten teams in the first 4. I'm with you on Notre Dame. I don't think that team should have been in. I said earlier, the one miss I would have had in terms of teams in and out, I had Texas A&M in, Notre Dame out. Notre Dame is 2-8 in quadrant 1, 2-1 in quadrant 2.
How about that, man? Dude, I thought that exact same thing at about like 4:00 this afternoon when I was trying to just put my bracket together. I was like, these dudes played 3 quad 2 games? 3?
So they're 4-9 in the first 2 quadrants. 5 games under 500 in the first 2 quadrants, with an additional loss in quadrant 3. 17 of their 21 wins came in either quadrant 3 or quadrant 4. There's nothing there. They got a win over Kentucky. There's nothing else there. And let me be clear. I'm happy for Mike Bray. Everybody likes Mike Bray. I'm happy for Mike Bray, but take that, put it aside. That's not an NCAA tournament resume. Let's go to Texas A&M. 4-10 in quadrant 1, 5-0 in quadrant 2. So 9-10 in the first 2 quadrants. I just told you Notre Dame's 5 games under 500 in the first 2 quadrants. Texas A&M is only 1 game below 500 in the first 2 quadrants, and they got twice as many quadrant 1 wins. They do have 2 quadrant 3 losses. I'm not ignoring them, but I still think it's a better resume than Notre Dame's. Also, if you care about the computers, Texas A&M is better than Notre Dame in the net, KenPom, BPI, Sagarin, KPI, Torvik. All of them. Beats them in every computer. And I'll take it a step further, and this apparently wasn't even close. I'd have Xavier in before I had Notre Dame, man. And I know Xavier's spiraled. I'm not trying to argue. I'm not trying to argue Xavier's one of the best at-large candidates now in its current form, but that's not supposed to be what this is about. It's supposed to be about bodies of work. And Xavier is 5-8 in quadrant 1, 4-3 in quadrant 2, so 9-11 in the first 2 quadrants with 2 quadrant 3 losses. I would not have Xavier in over Texas A&M, but I'd have Xavier in over Notre Dame.